Hello, Andrew. It is
Hi,
such
darling.
a joy and an honor to be with you as this book is pretty newly birthed into this world. And it's such a double birth because it feels like this isn't just another title on a long list of Andrew Harvey titles, although you certainly do have an impressive body of work in this world. But it feels like it's an invitation. This is the double birth part, an invitation for all of us to participate in the birth of a whole new humanity, potentially. I know you well. I love you deeply. And of course, anything you do is like, I just think incredible and wonderful, partly because of my affection for you, just makes everything look perfect that you do. But seriously, Andrew, I've heard you talk about the divinized humanity, the sacred marriage, the birth of of an evolved consciousness and body, all blended, that will in fact transfigure the world as we know it, if we dare to accept the invitation. And so this book is an invitation. It's a dare. I take the dare, I accept the invitation, and I can't wait to see how this ripples. Like, if people realize what you're saying, what you're actually saying, that Mary Magdalene and Jesus were co equals, both divine beings, both human beings, and that's important. The coming together of their divinity and humanity within themselves and between each other, and that we are two, divine and human. And if we reclaim that huge part that has been in the shadow, the feminine, in ourselves and in the world, this shift can actually happen. That's my little attempt at a summary today. And as you can see, I'm very excited. So,
Thank you, darling. What was it about the book that struck you most? You've given a wonderful overview of it, but you've been part of the whole creation of the book because very lovingly and generously, you and I talked many hours at night about the different themes of the book. But
yeah.
now it's solid, now it's clear, now it's crisp, and here it is, this vision. What in it excited you as someone who has spent her life devoted to the sacred feminine? What does it add to your passion and enthusiasm, if anything?
Everything. It's very important. The message in this book that feels very important to me and that really struck me is that this isn't about personal growth. I mean, that's great. If you can reclaim people of all genders you're speaking to, if we can each and all reclaim the repressed sacred feminine that is our birthright, all of us, we will in fact attain a transformed way of being, our body, mind, and heart. But that's not enough. I mean, you're a sacred activist. You're the progenitor of this notion of sacred activism, which is a very precise term. And so, what struck me most is the very practical way that you engage us in this
Oh,
process
thank you.
of reclaiming
Um,
for the for the benefit of all beings, to use Buddhist language.
I love that you said that because I think one of the most dangerous shadows for all of us, and I find it more dangerous as I grow older in myself and in others, is the golden shadow that we've been encouraged to project onto the fabulous and the great geniuses. We've been encouraged to celebrate Rumi and Jesus and Ramakrishna. And of course, they're amazing beings. But if we continue to project our own powers and possibilities onto others and revere them for what we're not stepping up to enact and embody ourselves, we will continue to be in a slightly corrupt, narcissistic, self-protected spiritual path, which we will think is fine because we're honoring all the right people, but we're not actually doing the work to embody the truth of what they are offering. So I had a very deep problem when I was starting to write the book. The problem is that when you dive into a story as amazing and magnificent as this, between two such astounding beings who are prepared to love totally and give everything completely, you're in great danger of activating yet another golden shadow. Oh my God, how amazing the sacred marriage of Mary and Jesus was. It was. But if you're not using, in the highest sense, that sacred marriage to alert yourself to your own potential, then the message gets aborted yet again.
Mm.
So I decided that there was a really exciting way of engaging people from the very beginning and trying to make sure that everybody reading this amazing story realizes that it is, in a very deep sense, our own story. It's the part about our own story we haven't been told. And once you tell that story in the way that I've tried to tell it, then you realize what a terrible number has been done on us by the patriarchal mystical systems, all of which suffer from three very important diseases. The first is a vision of enlightenment that is totally dissociated from matter, from relationship, from creation. It's a going off into the light. It's being a one with the formless. And that is a very important half-truth, but it's only one half of the truth. And the truth which it's not addressing is the one that is now screaming and burning to be heard and tended to. And it is time that humanity understands that an enlightenment which is dissociated keeps the wounds of horror bleeding.
Yes.
The second major distraction, and it's much more than a distraction, it is an abomination, is the patriarchal tradition's demonization of the body, constant screaming that the body is the block. The body isn't the block. The body is where everything amazing happens. All the greatest mystical openings, the great Kundalini experiences, the great revelations happen in the body, and in the body as it has been constructed by the divine intelligence with these 7 amazing openings that make it totally transparent when you realize what it is to the whole of reality. Imagine a human race who wasn't told that its body was the blob, but the great pulsing temple palace of divine consciousness and presence.
Yeah.
And then you get to the third, and this is really where the book is very carefully aimed. The third great destruction is being the demonization of our sexuality. And this is brilliant, actually. It was brilliant of them to do that, because if you separate a human race from its body and from its emotions and from its sexual vigor and joy, then it becomes sterile, schizophrenic, self-divided, self-loathing, hates life, and obeys every single word you say as the mediator of grace. And what is created from that is the world that we have, which is now suicidal and matricidal in obvious ways. So when you correct, and this book is a passionate attempt to correct these 3 madnesses, the madness of a vision of enlightenment, that drops the world, the creation, the body, the sexuality, the relationship between us and animals and the creation, the insanity of ever believing that that was enlightenment. If you drop the demonization of the body that has paralyzed billions of people and made them feel that life and the world is a sink of disaster and illusion, and if you open up the sublime territory of Tantra to human beings as a way to experience their sexuality as a direct initiation into divine energy. And if, and this is the fourth, and this is what the book is primarily celebrating, and if you open up for human beings as they did, path of the sacred marriage, of the unity of all opposites, heart, mind, body, soul, light, dark, deep inwardness and guided sacred action, then what you offer humanity is a vibrant, joyful, hope-filled, profoundly grounded and ecstatic yes, in place of the terrifying, strange no's that have been proposed by a patriarchal religious system separated from the bounty and the glory and the great yes of the divine feminine. So this book is a call for a new paradigm on every level, because it's quite clear to me, and it's, I think, clear to many of us, that the human race as it is now is incapable of dealing with the horrific problems that its dissociation and hubris and separation and fantasy have created. This was a recognition that Aurobindo had after a very fierce political career, and I think it's a right one, because I've spent years in the trenches of so-called spiritual movement of America, and it has been a devastating heartbreak. And the proof of everything that I've been saying about it is the complete lack of truly spine-filled resistance to the mad growth of fascism. The spiritual world has basically sat back and twiddled its thumbs while fascism has taken over the United States and the world. I've been crying out for years, but I've stopped crying out because I want to keep my voice for the rest of my life. So what I've come to is the knowledge that as we are, we're incapable. But fortunately, as we are is not the full information of who we are, because thanks to the ancient mystical systems and thanks to the brave pioneers like Jesus and Mary Magdalene, this ancient, completely integrated, vibrantly powerful, magnificent vision of wholeness and of truth has been, despite everything, preserved. And it's my vocation to bring it back. And that's what I've tried to do in this book. It is a manifesto of a revolution of embodied presence in action.
It is revolutionary. And there's, whenever I revisit this book, I always feel like a movement needs to be built around it, because otherwise it's just a really interesting idea about the evolution of humanity that's possible in these desperate times. But how, like with your book, The Hope, you built an entire movement of sacred activism around that manifesto. How do we build one here, Andrew? I'm in.
Thank you, darling. Well, I think it's obviously a question that we've been debating at very deep. And I would love to have a long, careful conversation with you about it. I want to be very honest. I am sick of the way in which everything is branded these days. And I don't want the Magdalene to become another brand. This year's brand. Last year it was Amazonian river deities. Next year it will be pipe smokers and Samarkand. And this year it's Mary Magdalene.
I
That's
see.
what I want to avoid.
Yes.
Because this is not another lovely fad. The return of Mary Magdalene is a nuclear return.
Yes.
So
I
that's the
agree.
first thing. I've seen it so often, this endless branding and people making money, and then the latest fad getting thrown away because people are onto the new restaurant, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I am watching very carefully how it's received,
Hmm.
because that will give me the sign as to how to organize the Magdalene Revolution or how to create a container for it. And what I'm thinking at this moment is that it's having three reactions. There are those who are so stuck in the old ways that they think it's all crazy, but they can't deny the scholarship, but they're unnerved by it and they put it down. Then there is the people who are fascinated and open and vibrant, they love it. And then there are those who've been prepared by their own mystical experience and by their own deep passion and longing for the return of the divine feminine that really recognize what this book is trying to be. And what I'm thinking at the moment is to start something called the Magdalene Revolution, but make it intimate circles of people
Yeah.
that encourage and build each other's truth. Because the Magdalene is inviting us to something that is extremely difficult in some ways to understand. We can understand escaping the world quite easily because we all want to at some deep level. It's so mad and so difficult. We can understand agony and suffering. We can understand a vision of enlightenment that is dissociated. But here she is bringing in not words, but this vibrant, embodied field of love energy, occupying the entire human being and radiating out from the human being in grace filled presence and sacred action. So the Magdalene Revolution needs to be groups that are aware of that and find ways to tend and encourage each other's embodied love energy and the actions that flow from it. And finding exactly how to do that is going to take a little time. It's going to take experimentation, working in a laboratory of the feminine, because it's so important that it gets done right. So, and I think in about 3 or 4 months, I will know, and I will love to talk to you in detail about it, because it's, you know, how easily everything gets put into the sausage machine of publicity. I
Yeah.
don't want this to be wasted. And I don't want,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Well, I think one of the ways that we all can begin is by getting copies and getting our loved ones in our communities to read it.
I
That's
would
something
love that.
I'm definitely on board with that. I want everyone I know to read it, and then the step two is to do what we're doing here. Like, what struck you about this? What feels possible now that the Magdalene Revolution has entered the world in the form of this book?
Can I ask you a question? We know each other so well. I mean, we've been through a great many things together and so deeply and so lovingly. What seems to you possible with the Magdalene Revolution? What is it bringing to the table that the other marvelous books on the feminine haven't brought? I've got a kind of vision which I hope it's,
Yeah,
but I don't know what it is, whether it is or not.
I want to hear more about that. Well, it's so much more than just let's reclaim Mary Magdalene's story, which we must do. It's a
Yes,
vital story for the evolution of
but it's
humanity.
just a doorway into an even greater story, isn't it?
That's right. And I think that these feminine attributes, so-called feminine attributes that have been denigrated across the religious spectrum, need to be not apologized for, but centered. And those include not just the tender and the compassionate and the merciful, but the fierce, the truth-telling, the wild, undomesticated, unapologetic, body-centered realities of that feel sacred to me, and I think to so many of us, people of all genders.
Yes.
One of the things that really struck me, I don't know if you remember this, Andrew, when I read an early draft, and you had talked about when in the Magdalene, the Gospel of Mary, the Gnostic fragments, just breaks my heart every time I read these fragmented Gospels. Like, what else was
Those
there?
6 pages missing in the
Oh,
Gospel of Mary, what would you do for that? Yes.
exactly. I get very attached personally to these
Me
things.
too.
But what struck me so much when I read the Gospel of Mary, I don't know, it was only about 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe that's when it was really started being available. Was a similar thing that struck you, but either we hadn't talked about it or we had you hadn't realized that I had had such a reaction to this, which was that in the Gospel of Mary, when Peter and the other disciples question Mary's authority, her authority is rooted in love. And this isn't mushy,
Oh,
ambiguous
no. I mean, it's
love.
love in its purest, fiercest, grandest sense. Yes.
Exactly. That's the revolution, by the way, to me.
Yes.
But you have to be careful with the word love because people just glaze over.
Oh,
But
God,
that's the
yes.
ferocity. That's the power of this revolution. So when Peter and the others question Mary's right, her authority to say what the teacher told her and to dare to teach us, her response wasn't, let me give you the 6 talking points and convince you. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't overbearing. It wasn't underbearing. She cried. And when she burst into tears, the fact that her brothers would doubt her at that level in the wake of the beloved's death was unbearable for her fierce and awakened heart of love. It was like, what? How? How could you possibly? It was so painful. And when I read that in the Gospel of Mary, I hadn't heard anyone talk about this. I felt like crying. And I felt like that is the wound of the feminine right there. That daring to love with a wide open heart, mind, soul, and body is fucking threatening to the boys club. There it is. How do we transform this wound? By first being with it.
What you say. I love what you say about her weeping. And I meditated a lot on that. And I think there's something else there. Of course, what you say is right. It's a terrible wound. She's heartbroken, but she's also heartbroken for them.
Yes. You say that in the book, and I love
Yes.
that part.
I
That's
think it's
important.
so important
Yeah.
because it's she realizes at that cosmic moment that
Oh,
everything that she brought, everything that he also in the part that was so attuned to her and to the divine feminine brought, would be negated, misinterpreted by these men and their successors. And through that, great suffering would come upon the world, but it would also come upon them because they'd lived shriveled, narrowed, self divided lives, and she was weeping for them.
yes. Yes. I feel that way too, Mary.
And that's also the wound of the feminine, isn't it?
It
It's
is the
not
wound of
just
the
the real wound of the feminine is not only that it feels agonized, that it can't express the depth and the wildness and the passion of its love, but it's also a wound for those who cannot receive that love because it knows how transfiguring that love is.
yes.
If you
That
characterize the wound of the feminine as too much the victim wound, you miss the majesty of those tears. You miss the prophetic intensity of those tears. She's seeing Gaza. She's seeing the death of the Western world. She's seeing environmental devastation. She's seeing all the horror that's going to come from that negation of the sensuous world and of the divinity of connection. She's seeing it, she's weeping it, and it's those tears that this book is trying to dry, because the time for her to cry is over. Now is the time for her to rule with him in our hearts. And I think
Yes.
that's the second thing that is actually different about this book. I hear, thank you so much for saying about the frosty. But the second thing is that this is a celebration of the sacred marriage. And in so many of the sacred feminine circles we've both been part of, there's been a wonderful attempt to reconstruct the feminine, but there's also been a lot of male bashing and deconstruction of masculinity and rage at masculinity, which is entirely understandable given the horror of the patriarchy, but makes it impossible for the real diagram of the sacred marriage, the real map, to be given. I've had people who've read the book say to me, "Why do you go on and on about Jesus?" Can you imagine? Well, I'm sweeter than I was 10 years ago, much more tired. So therefore I smile and I say, well, the story of Jesus has influenced the entire history of the planet. Maybe there's something very important about this person. And maybe if you love Mary Magdalene so much, which I understand, won't you even think of loving the person that she loved and gave her life to? Why would she have done that? There are people who have said, Mary Magdalene had Jesus as her sort of wingman. It's craziness. What I'm trying to bring back is the real truth of a relationship of sublime evolutionary equals. And I think in the massive movement to reimagine and bring back the feminine, what has been missing often has been this original whole vision of the sacred marriage, of the unity of the real sacred masculine, purified of the crazy despotism and famish hunger for power that comes when it's dissociated from the feminine, and the real feminine separated from the patriarchal need, from the feminine to be sweet and obedient and always smiling.
Well,
When the
and this
real
is
masculine protective of life comes together with the real feminine, sometimes like a lioness roaring for life, then what is built in the personality is a fearless, undivided spirit which cannot be depleted. And that's what they're modeling for us, and why it's so important for us to claim it at this moment.
that is what they're modeling for us. And you say in the book that their love included, this is the human and divine coming together, included their sexuality, included feelings, God forbid, emotions, desires,
Well,
and
I think it's even more than
messiness.
that. Yeah, and messiness, obviously. That Messi is one of the mother's favorite and most divine names, isn't it? One of the reasons why the Boys Club can't stand her, because she
That's right.
writes right.
So
But I think
you've always been about reclaiming the marriage of opposites, transcendence and immanence, masculine and feminine, body and soul, human and divine. And
prayer
that,
and action, yeah, they're all,
right.
yes.
And that's the call, the invitation that if transformation on a global level beyond our little personal awakenings, which are valid, but not enough, not nearly enough, if this collective transfiguration has any hope of happening, and you have great hope, you express great hope that it
Oh,
is
I
is
do.
happening. This
Mm,
this dark night is a birth canal,
yes.
but it includes the marriage of these opposites, this glorious coming together of all of these things.
Well, only the coming together of opposites mirrors the nature of eternal reality. And how can you be powerful and real if your whole personality is constellated around insufficient information? And how can we possibly be a unified, joyful, healthy, whole human race with religions that despise the body, trivialize and demonize our sexuality, and keep us divided from the creation that we are one with.
Well, Andrew, many people who are going to be listening to this, for instance, aren't even involved in religion. They gave up long ago. They
Yeah.
deconstructed it and stepped over the pieces and got on
But
with
it's not just religion. It's we've talked
that's
about
what I
this
was going to
endlessly.
say.
It's
It's
the
in
mystical systems themselves that have been contaminated by this body hatred and sex hatred. Read the Dhammapada, read the
all of it.
stuff that it's all of them. They're always saying the body is disgusting, don't play with yourself, don't have dirty thoughts, they'll just drive you to hell. This is insanity.
But it's infiltrated all levels of society. And so that's
Absolutely.
why everyone, regardless of your religious orientation or lack thereof, suffers from this kind of messaging.
Everybody. And the biggest purveyor of suffering has been Christianity, because it was Christianity that took to all the colonies, for example, all its repressive sexual laws, which have created unspeakable suffering in civilizations that were already quite healthy about sexuality. So, rewriting the Christian story to reveal sublime sexuality at the core of it is fundamentally rewriting the history of the world and offering a new way for everyone to live and the real story. Because when you said that, for example, you said something beautiful about Mary and their love, including sexuality. But I don't think it was, I think it goes much further. I
Tell
think
me.
that, the depth of the passion between them, that it was both soul passion and body passion, was what birthed this love force, because it wasn't simply transcendent. There you could sitting there quietly loving everything and wishing for wonderful things to happen to everybody. That's what patriarchal religion loves, people doing that. That's fine. And then, nor is it nor is it a carnal love in which they just enjoy each other. This bringing together of the highest soul truth and the most passionate, visceral body passion creates a new force.
Yeah.
That's the force of embodied love consciousness. And it cannot be born from merely transcendent consciousness awakening, nor from merely carnal activity. It can only be born when true lovers recognize each other as divine incarnations, adore each other, and through that experience find their deepest physical passion and their most exalted soul knowledge coming together in a wholly new embodied way. That's the transfiguration stream.
So you're calling upon all of us to encounter the other as the intimate incarnation of the divine and to take that seriously in our human relationships.
Yes. And on every level, when people say, well, I'm not in a tantric relationship, oh, yes, you are. You and I are in a tantric relationship. We're not lovers physically, but we adore each other. We listen to each other. We help each other in the deepest way we can. We honor each other. I'm in a tantric relationship with all the animals that I see. There are so many, of course, because the more we become in touch with our depth of love in the body, the more our body becomes love's body, and the more all of its words and all of its gestures and all of its actions become emanations of that grounded, embodied, pulsing, passionate, compassionate love. And that's what is revolutionary about this. It's not simply that they include sexuality, is that they take the core power of sexuality, the Shakti, the mother power that rises into sexuality to create, and they merge that with divine love, because they are consciously with each other, experiencing each other both as completely divine and completely human, completely transcendent and completely carnal at the same time. This is the new humanity.
Amen. It's
And
very
it's so
firming.
wonderful, you know. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Danny, but
Yeah.
one of the things that I really want to get through in this book is it's not just a challenge to conventional Christianity, it's a challenge to all the tantric systems. And the reason is this, and this is fascinating stuff. The first reason is that if you look, and you and I studied the Hindu texts, the Buddhist texts, the Taoist tantric texts, and they're amazing. They have fantastic things to teach us. But and this includes the Kabbalah. But when you've read them all, you realize that they're mostly about the guys. The women are there; they're washerwomen and they're nice prostitutes, and they do what the guys want to give them nice, liberating sexual experiences. But the women are not treated as equals
Right.
in this tantra. It cannot happen without her being a complete co-equal. That is a revolution.
Not a
It's a
consort.
not a consort. She's not the available juicy body to experience yourself. She is someone to love and adore and to learn from and to be equal with and to be penetrated by and to be infused by. That changes the whole tantric landscape. It takes it out of the secret patriarchal clutches it's been in, and it opens it up to the phenomenal and multi-level power of the feminine in a way that has never happened before. And the second thing that makes them different from a lot of even the greatest tantric texts that I've read, and Kashmir, Shaibat, and all the rest of it, their love wasn't for them to have an amazing time and have incredible experiences, although, of course, it gave them that. Their love was to birth a new creation. Their love was to give them fuel to be able to go out into an incredibly violent and hostile world and birth a new creation. So, unlike the other tantras, which are about how the highest levels of enlightenment can't be achieved except through divinized vision of sexuality, that's fine, but it's entirely about them. It's not about the world. So, in
Right.
these two very important ways, the Christian Tantra is a Tantra of radical equality, and it's not about personal liberation. It's about giving you the guts and the strength to actually turn up as a birther of a new world in a dangerous and terrible situation. And that's, for me, why bringing the real story back is so important, because it says to the Christians, obviously, you've got this crazy what you've been talking about. Stop it. This is the story. And it's amazing, and it makes Jesus even more extraordinary. And it says to the Hindus and Buddhists and Taoists, it's all guys, baby. You're talking about transformative sexuality. Where are the women?
Well, this is a beautiful encapsulation of what matters most.
Isn't it astonishing? I mean, there are a few great books like Miranda Shaw's book, Passionate Enlightenment, where she discusses the group of wild and amazing women in 7th, 8th, and 9th century Nepal, which basically said the whole Buddhist story is bullshit. The Buddha learned truth from his wife. I mean, it's a passionate tantric rewriting of everything, but that was so brief because the Boys Club took it over and used it for its own purposes. And so much of what passes for high tantric teaching is actually, when you look at it carefully, another form of colonization of the feminine by men who want to drink the wine without paying the price.
Yes, I agree 1,000,000%.
And that's nothing to do with their relationship. You can see from the very beginning, it's a completely equal relationship. He worshipped her, he learned from her, he adored her. He was scared of her, as you should be of an awakened woman, and she felt the same for him. It was a complete meeting. And the reason why that story could never be told, it's actually it's now for the first time the human race can imagine it. Think of how women have been treated by all the religions and all the societies up to now, and even now. But it's just beginning to be possible to imagine a world in which women will be treated at their highest level of dignity and spiritual power. Finally, it's taken so long. And the people who've been parroting stuff about it have been as much parasites of authoritarianism as the others. It's time to have a real vision of radical co-equality, what it would really mean. And it scares the shit out of the boys' club. They can appropriate the feminine, but actually to confront the feminine and to be constantly deliciously unnerved and taken deeper by the feminine now, that isn't something that you'll find in the tantric texts of the boys' club. But you'll
No.
find it written all over this story because it's the real story.
And it does require, it seems, some um, extra light shining on the feminine before balance has any hope of being activated. So, when
Oh,
women
God.
get together and we're pissed off and we're outraged and we have to do some throwing of things for a minute, I
Yes.
I think that that is part of the process of leveling uh, leveling the field and be getting ready for this radical equality that is drenched in love.
And challenge because radical equality is unbearable for the ego.
Hmm.
Even in the most attuned marriage, if you've got an open eye, which unfortunately both of us have, you can see the power plays, even between people who truly, truly love and adore each other. So
Hmm.
when you're talking about sacred equality, you're talking about a stage of surrender to the grandeur of the other,
Hmm.
which not many love affairs or love relationships ever even imagined it get close to. So it is a challenge. And it's a tremendous challenge for all men at this moment, including myself, because really, here I spent 5 years unable to write, going through everything, doing what I had to do to get this book into the shape that it was. And it was only about year 4 that I realized what she was doing. And that was, she saying, you think you're such a brilliant man. You've written all of these books. You think you could sit down with a plan and write about me? Try it.
The
I was broken.
Pentecost.
Exactly. And it was so wonderful too, because she wasn't doing it meanly. She was just making me be exposed to the limitation of the masculine approach. That's why the book is written as it is. It's written completely differently from any of my other books because it moves like a fugue. It moves like changing mist, different forms, which give you a sense of what's behind the form. But once you get that we haven't yet seen this sacred equality, we haven't yet seen the true relationship between sexuality and divinity. We haven't actually had a culture yet which could be capable of embracing the sanctity of the body and sexuality, although it's much closer now than it's ever been because of the sexual liberation of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Then you realize what, in a sense, what a manifesto this book is, what a passionate prayer it is. And it has, it's passionate because we're killing ourselves. And this is a real recipe for life.
Yes. And Mary Magdalene shows us the way to have life and have it abundantly.
Absolutely. And she shows us the way too. And I know you'll love this because we've had so many deep discussions about this. And in many ways, you symbolize it for me, and I love you for it. One of the things that characterized her teaching was its refusal to talk about original sin or to give evil any more credibility than it already had in an outrageously violent world. And one of the things that amazes me about her and affirms her realization is that after the crucifixion, her teaching was resolutely and ecstatically hopeful and optimistic.
Mhm.
So here you have somebody who lived through absolutely everything and more than a human being could live, who experienced the crucifixion of her beloved, who experienced rape and abuse and horror and victimization for being a woman and being thrown out of the story. And her whole teaching, her whole presence is absolutely adamantinely joyful. And I think what she's saying to all of us teachers at this moment, all of us who have to try to shepherd the human race through the birth canal of its most appalling evolutionary adventure, is saying to us, you have to go so very deep to discover the joy that you will have to emanate to be of any use to the others as they scream and get paralyzed and fall. As the great dark night, which is now here, explodes, and it's going to get very, very much worse very soon. And we need to be not just in love with her and in love with this vision, but we need to ask her for the grace to be able, in the middle of the flames and the storm and the screaming and the despair, to stand like her, like a calm tower, and emanate by our presence the radiance that we essentially are.
Yes, I take the challenge.
What can we must,
I think if
that
we
is,
wait for ourselves to be well resourced, wealthy enough, healthy enough, psychologically,
you'll be waiting for 17 more lives.
it's time.
This, you never, these, Mary and Jesus were ragged.
Yes.
One of the things I love most about Jesus was him cursing the fig tree. I've read marvelous commentaries in Greek and Alexandrian and God knows what about this, and they always have the most incredibly transcendental ideas about why he cursed the fig tree. No, he cursed the fig tree because he was bored, exhausted, harrowed, and eaten alive by the people who wanted him to save them all the time. That's why he cursed the fig tree. He had a very bad hair day. And the same, you can only imagine what she had. Well, the descriptions that we have of her is that she was sometimes very, very enthusiastic in a way that frightened people. Something I know a little bit about. So she she had that quality. So if we met them, we we'd think these are ragged human beings, but you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be shadow free. You have to be engaged with unifying the opposites and becoming more and more responsive and vibrant and alive and proactive for God at the core of your life. And that's the feminine too, isn't it? Saying to the boys' club, you've invented this idea of perfection. You've then beaten yourself up with it. You've then instituted it as truth and lacerated everybody else and made them guilty and shame driven and split. How on earth do you think you're going to get out of this situation without scrapping the entire system and being humble enough to open to the true, yes, the reality of the unity of the transcendent and the immanent, that everything is holy and sacred because everything is crystallized love, light, consciousness. That's truth. That's reality. Great mystics have always known it. Now it's imperative that we live it and that we act from it. Otherwise, the world will die out. If we do live it, the grace of the divine will help us find new reservoirs of energy and joy and wisdom, and amazing miracles will take place as they have in my life. I know the truth of what I'm saying, so that's what makes me so passionate about getting this vision across.
Well, and it's so hopeful, Andrew, because it's not esoteric. It's something that we all have access to, and
Thank you.
that's what you're reminding us of.
I thank you for saying that, darling. But you know something, and I don't know whether this. I think it's. I think we all know this. I think we all somewhere know the truth of the sacred marriage, of us, of everything being holy, of everything being irradiated. I think we all know that existence has a fundamental goodness and mystery. And this fundamental knowledge has been obscured by the patriarchy, has been manipulated by it. But what I'm hoping to do in the Magdalene Revolution is to reawaken that fundamental knowing, which has to be there if the sacred marriage is true and if we are immanent and transcendent holograms of the divine, then that intelligence that knows that is there waiting to be evoked. And that's what this book and others now are doing, because those of us who are evolutionary mystics know that this is the only way for the human race to become strong enough to endure what it has to do. Now rise to the challenge of a situation it's created, which will destroy it unless it evolves.
I agree. Thank you, by the way, for recommending on your very short list at the end of your book, one of mine,
Oh,
Ordinary Mysticism.
of
So,
course.
my friends and beloveds, thank you for meeting with us. This Andrew and I do this a lot over the years, where we just engage in these passionate conversations about what matters most, about the mystical path, about the connection between all of the mystical traditions and the necessity for activating them on behalf of all beings right now in this global dark night in which we find ourselves. And we could do it forever. And I'm so honored to be able to do that with witnesses. So
Thank you, darling. And thank
thank
you for
you.
everything. Thank you for being such a loyal champion of this book and my work and such a wonderful friend. Bless you.
It's vital. It's the dipper of water, it's the cup of fire, it's everything that we need in these horrific times. And it filled me with hope and delight. And um, I just love what you said about the tears being tears for all of humanity, particularly the patriarchy that suffers and the men that suffer most from
Oh,
this.
yes.
So I'm going to go home and what did you say? Surrender to the grandeur of the other in my kitchen, broiling trout for dinner.
Please give Shiva my obeisance. I love your husband, and it surrender to the grandeur of the other. That's what the ego never wants to do. But love, thank God, is powerful enough to get you there.
It's dangerous.
Very. But that's why we like it. Yes.
Thank you, Andrew.
My blessings on you, darling, and my thanks for you and my gratitude that you exist. I love you.
Same here. I love you.